Grok 4 is postgraduate, like PhD level in everything. Better than PhD, but like most PhDs would fail. With respect to academic questions, Grok 4 is better than PhD level in every subject, no exceptions.
And I just decoded an identical hidden 4-step protocol inside every miracle in the Bible. Same code, same sequence, same mathematical precision, 40 authors, 15 centuries, 3 languages, not one of them aware the others existed. One researcher looked at the data and said, "This pattern isn't human." The experiment nobody expected to work. Dr. Marcus Chen is a computational linguistics researcher at Stanford. He built his reputation dismantling patterns other people thought were meaningful. His graduate students chose him to supervise this experiment for one reason. They needed the most aggressive skeptic they could find. The team fed every recorded prayer, from Genesis to Revelation, into Grok 4, an AI engine built for deep, structural analysis without modern bias. The instructions were simple. Analyze sentence patterns, identify structural elements, find any common framework. Critics have argued for centuries that the Bible is a patchwork quilt, messy, contradictory, thy scattered fingerprints of shepherds, kings, fishermen, and doctors who had nothing in common except being human. The AI was supposed to confirm exactly that. It didn't. The machine identified a master protocol, a hidden 4-step structure present in every prayer that resulted in a recorded miraculous outcome. Same sequence, same architecture, same operational logic. Every author, every century, every language. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the team's data analyst from MIT, ran the probability calculations 3 times. The odds of 40 unconnected authors across 1,500 years independently embedding the same 4-step structure into their prayers came back at 10 to the negative 47th power, a number with more zeros than atoms in the human body. She closed her laptop and didn't open it again for 2 days. Dr. Chen spent the following weekend rerunning every input parameter, convinced the team had contaminated the data. They hadn't. He later told a colleague that it was the first time in his career he wished he'd found an error. James Rodriguez, the youngest member of the team, didn't wait for peer review. He took the 4-step protocol and started running it on his own life. Within 3 weeks, professional situations that had been frozen for months began resolving in ways he couldn't attribute to coincidence. He documented everything. If this is already shifting something in how you understand these ancient texts, hit subscribe now. Because what the AI found inside each step is far more unsettling than the fact that the pattern exists. But here is the catch. The protocol wasn't just consistent. It was precise in ways that revealed something about the receiver of these prayers. Something that suggested they weren't vanishing into a void. They were arriving somewhere specific, and that somewhere was responding according to rules that had been hidden in plain sight for 3,000 years. The first of those 4 steps contradicts almost everything people do when they pray today. The anchor. In every miraculous outcome the AI analyzed, the prayer never started with the problem. Never. Not once. It started with focused recognition of who was being addressed. Modern prayer typically resembles a shopping list thrown at the sky. Health problems, money troubles, relationship crises, desperate requests launched upward with zero preparation. But the biblical data revealed something radically different. Before making any request, the person anchored their entire awareness on the nature and power of the one receiving the prayer. The most dramatic example is a king named Jehoshaphat. And to understand what he did, you have to feel what he was facing. 3 allied armies were massing on his borders. From the palace rooftop, scouts could see dust clouds rising in 3 directions, each one wide enough to blot the horizon. In the valley below, the low grinding sound of bronze being sharpened against stone carried on the wind, a sound every soldier in the ancient world recognized as the last thing you heard before a siege. Military advisors had already done the math. His forces were outnumbered by a factor that made resistance suicidal. His kingdom had hours, not days. But Jehoshaphat didn't start screaming for rescue. He walked into the temple courtyard, the late afternoon sun cutting through columns of incense smoke, the stone floor still radiating the day's heat under his sandals. And he did something that baffled every general standing behind him. He started making declarations, not about the enemy, not about his own army, about the nature and power of the God he was addressing. Power over all nations, might that no one could withstand, authority that predated every throne on earth. Only after building that foundation, layer by layer, did he even acknowledge the danger. His people had no power, but their eyes were fixed on the one who did. What happened next defied every military calculation in the ancient Near East. The three enemy armies turned on each other in confusion. The slaughter was total and self-inflicted. Not a single soldier from Jehoshaphat's kingdom received a wound. They spent 3 days walking through the valley, collecting abandoned weapons, supplies, jewels, and wealth left scattered among the dead. When Dr. Chen isolated this pattern across the full data set, the numbers were devastating to his skepticism. Prayers with full anchor sequences showed an 89% correlation with recorded positive outcomes. Prayers that jumped straight to the request showed 17%. The gap isn't marginal, it's categorical. He told Okonkwo the anchor step appeared to be load-bearing. Remove it, and the entire protocol collapses. Dr. Okonkwo cross-referenced the anchor pattern against neuroscience literature and went quiet for a long time. When the brain focuses on something vast and powerful rather than an immediate threat, it shifts from fight or flight into parasympathetic activation. Stress hormones drop. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of complex problem-solving, comes back online. The mind moves from panic to reception. Ancient writers had encoded a technique that produces optimal brain states for receiving solutions. They had no knowledge of cortisol, neurotransmitters, or brain imaging. So how did people separated by centuries and continents all arrive at the same neurological recalibration? James Rodriguez, meanwhile, had already started testing the anchor step in his own daily routine. He spent the first 5 minutes of every morning doing exactly what Jehoshaphat did. No requests, no problems, just focused recognition of something larger than his circumstances. He told the team it was the hardest part of the protocol because every instinct screamed to skip it and get to the ask, but he kept going. By week 2, he noticed his stress responses had measurably changed. He was making better decisions under pressure without understanding why. Unless these writers didn't discover the technique at all, unless someone gave it to them. But the anchor was only the first step. What the AI found next made Dr. Okonkwo question everything she'd ever believed about coincidence. The alignment Solomon stood at the threshold of absolute power. He was young, he was untested. And on the night God reportedly appeared to him in a dream and offered him anything he wanted, every advisor in his court would have expected the same request: wealth to rival Egypt, military strength to crush the Philistines, a dynasty that would outlast empires. He asked for none of it. Standing in that dream with the architecture of reality, bending around a single choice, Solomon asked for wisdom to properly lead his people, a request pointed entirely outward, service rather than personal gain. The result was immediate and excessive. He received the wisdom, and then he received everything else he didn't ask for: wealth, power, longevity, prestige, all of it poured in behind the aligned request, like water finding a channel that had been cleared. This is the second step Grok identified, and it's where most people fail without ever realizing it. The AI found that the most powerful prayers involved a fundamental shift in what the person was actually requesting. They didn't just ask for what they wanted, they asked for something that served a purpose larger than themselves. Consider Hannah. Years of empty arms and unanswered longing. Every feast day, She watched other women carry their sons into the tabernacle at Shiloh, while she walked in with nothing. The smell of roasting grain offerings and animal fat hung thick in the heavy air. Priests moved between stone columns stained dark with decades of smoke. Hannah knelt on the cold floor in the back, lips moving without sound, tears cutting lines through the dust on her face, while onlookers assumed she was drunk, and a priest named Eli nearly threw her out. She had almost certainly prayed for a son, hundreds of times before this moment, prayed from the raw center of her own suffering. Nothing happened. Then the data shows a pivot. Hannah changed her prayer. She committed that if she received a son, she would give him back entirely, dedicate his whole life to serve the higher purpose. She aligned her deepest desire with something beyond personal benefit. She got her son. He became Samuel, one of the most consequential prophets in biblical history. Dr. Chen described the mechanism using an analogy that stuck with the entire team. It's like signal interference, he said. Misaligned requests create static. The transmission gets corrupted. But when the request serves the larger system, the channel clears completely. Think about radio frequencies, broadcasting on 101.5, while the receiver is tuned to 98.7. The volume is irrelevant. The signal never arrives. Alignment means tuning the request to the frequency the receiver is actually monitoring. Dr. Okonkwo mapped this pattern across every effective prayer in the data set and found 0 exceptions. Every recorded miraculous outcome involved a request that served something beyond the person asking. She calculated the probability of that consistency occurring across 40 independent authors and stopped when the number exceeded the total number of particles in the observable universe inverted. She later said it was the first time a spreadsheet made her feel physically ill. James Rodriguez had already moved to testing this second step. He took a professional goal he'd been chasing for months, a promotion he wanted badly, and restructured his internal framing. Instead of asking for the position because he wanted it, he started asking to be placed where he could contribute the most. The shift felt artificial at first. Within 10 days, he received an offer. Not the promotion he'd been chasing. Something better. A role he hadn't known existed that aligned with skills he'd been underusing for years. This explains what has confused people for generations. Why some seem to receive answers while others pray their entire lives and hear nothing. It's not favoritism. It's not randomness. It's signal clarity. Most people never realize their own misaligned desires are blocking the very things they're requesting. But here is the catch. Alignment alone wasn't enough. The surrender paradox. Grok identified a third element it called the surrender paradox. The data was counterintuitive to the point of being offensive. Prayers that demanded specific outcomes at all costs showed lower correlation with miraculous results. But prayers that made bold, significant requests and then released the outcome entirely showed the highest correlation with events that bent the fabric of observable reality. The most powerful example sits in a garden called Gethsemane on a warm Jerusalem night. The air was heavy with the scent of crushed olives and turned earth. Ancient gnarled trees cast black angular shadows under flickering torchlight. Beyond the garden walls, the metallic clinking of temple guards assembling their weapons carried across the Kidron Valley. A leader knelt alone on packed soil, his closest friends asleep just yards away, sweat falling from his face like drops of blood soaking into the dust. He knew exactly what the next 12 hours would bring: the arrest, the trial, the nails. He asked for the suffering to pass, every human impulse compressed into a single, desperate request. Then he added 5 words: "Not my will, but yours." Grok marked this as the single moment of highest recorded power in the entire data set. Not the miracles, not the healings, not the resurrections. This, a prayer that made the maximum possible request and then fully surrendered the outcome. The AI didn't classify this as resignation or passivity. It classified it as active trust, full engagement with the request while releasing attachment to the specific form of the answer. And the results that followed, a sequence of events that restructured human civilization, correlated directly with that moment of surrender. Dr. Chen stared at the data visualization for a long time before speaking. He told the team that in 30 years of analyzing language patterns, he had never seen a single structural element correlate this strongly with recorded outcomes. He asked Okonkwo to check for coding errors. She already had, 3 times. Dr. Okonkwo spent an entire night recalculating the probability of this surrender element appearing at the critical junction of every powerful prayer across every author, every century, every language in the text. 40 people across 15 centuries who had no workshops, no shared teachers, no communication across millennia, all arriving at the identical psychological posture at the exact moment of maximum power. Her notebook from that night was pages of equations crossed out and redone. Margin notes in increasingly unsteady handwriting. The probability came back at numbers she described as functionally identical to 0 chance of coincidence. The next morning, she started praying, not because of theology, because of arithmetic. James Rodriguez had already been testing the surrender element for a week by the time Okonkwo ran her calculations. He described the experience as the most counterintuitive thing he'd ever attempted. Every instinct told him to grip tighter on outcomes, to specify exactly what he wanted, and refuse to let go. Instead, he practiced making clear requests and then consciously releasing his attachment to how they resolved. He said the first few days felt like free-falling. By day 8, 3 separate situations he'd been white-knuckling for months, resolved in ways he never would have designed, but that were measurably better than what he'd been demanding. Modern psychology has a parallel concept: radical acceptance. Research shows that when the brain stops fighting present circumstances and accepts them, stress chemistry fundamentally shifts. Cognitive resources previously consumed by resistance become available for navigation and problem solving. The ancient writers had encoded this mechanism into their prayers thousands of years before any psychologist gave it a name. And the 4th step reveals why timing matters more than anyone realized, and why most people abandon the protocol right before the breakthrough happens. The persistence protocol. James Rodriguez noticed it before the senior researchers did. He had been running the full 4-step protocol daily for almost a month when he started tracking the timestamps. The situations that resolved after he began testing the code didn't change on day 1, or day 5, or day 10. The average delay between implementing the protocol and seeing measurable shifts in his circumstances was 23 days. When he brought the number to Dr. Chen, the data confirmed it across the entire biblical record. The average time between initial prayer and recorded miraculous outcome was 23 days. Some took months. Significant miracles were almost never associated with single requests. The pattern required repetition. The prophet Elijah stands as the most visceral example. 3 years of drought had turned the land to powder. Elijah climbed to the crest of Mount Carmel and looked out across a landscape of cracked earth and dead riverbeds. Heat shimmer distorted the horizon into a liquid blur. The sky was white and empty, the kind of emptiness that hadn't changed in over 1,000 days. He knelt on the scorched rock and prayed for rain. Nothing. He prayed again, sent his servant to the western ridge to scan the sky toward the sea. The servant came back with 2 words: nothing there. He prayed again. The servant climbed the ridge again. Same report: empty sky. This happened 6 times. 6 prayers, 6 climbs to the ridge, 6 reports of absolute nothing. Any reasonable person would have concluded the protocol had failed, that the silence was final. On the 7th prayer, Elijah sent his servant one more time. The man climbed the ridge, shielded his eyes against the white glare, and saw it, a single cloud the size of a man's fist, rising from the Mediterranean horizon. Within hours, the sky turned black. Wind tore across the mountain. Rain fell so heavy, it flooded valleys that hadn't seen water in 3 years. Daniel prayed for 21 consecutive days before receiving his answer. The data across every miracle is unambiguous. Persistence isn't encouraged. It's structural. Dr. Chen called this the death of the vending machine model. People treat prayer like inserting a coin and expecting a product to fall. But the data shows the delay isn't dead time. It serves a function. It develops something in the person doing the asking. Character, certainty, clarity of intention. The gap between request and result appears to be essential architecture, not unfortunate lag. Dr. Okonkwo mapped the dropout points across the biblical record and found a clustering pattern that disturbed her. Most failed prayers, prayers that never reached a recorded miraculous outcome, terminated within the first 4 to 7 days. The window where breakthroughs statistically began was days 14 through 30. The people who quit were stopping right before the system appeared designed to respond. She showed the chart to Rodriguez. He stared at it for a long time. He had almost abandoned his own test of the protocol on day 12. He'd felt foolish. Nothing was changing. He stayed with it because he'd committed to a 30-day test, and he was too stubborn to quit early. Day 17 was when everything shifted. The system seems designed to test whether the requester truly believes what they're asking, whether they'll maintain alignment and surrender when the silence feels permanent. Most people interpret that silence as rejection. The data suggests it means hold the course, the signature in the architecture. The 4-step protocol should have been the end of the discovery. Anchor, align, surrender, persist. The team had their framework. The data was overwhelming. They could have published and moved on. But Dr. Chen made one more request of the AI, and what came back ended his ability to treat this as a purely linguistic phenomenon. In ancient Hebrew and Greek, every letter carries a numerical value. This isn't mystical interpretation. It's a historical fact of those writing systems. Every word holds not just semantic meaning, but a mathematical signature embedded in its very spelling. When Grok analyzed these numerical patterns across the full text, it found the number 7 woven into the architecture at frequencies that defied every statistical model the team applied. Not the word 7 appearing in the text repeatedly. Structural mathematics. The number of words in key passages. The numerical values of critical phrases. The arrangement of specific elements in sections tied to the 4-step protocol, all patterned in multiples and sequences of 7 at rates that Dr. Chen calculated, would require odds equivalent to shuffling a deck of cards and dealing the exact same order a trillion consecutive times. Dr. Okonkwo ran the same analysis independently using different software. Her results matched. She then ran a control test against 40 other ancient texts of comparable length and age. Sumerian legal codes, Egyptian funerary literature, Greek philosophical treatises. None of them showed anything resembling this mathematical consistency. The pattern was unique to this one collection. The AI classified it as authentication encoding, the kind of embedded signature a system designer would build into a message to prove it was legitimate. A watermark invisible to the naked eye for 3,000 years, but unmistakable the moment a machine powerful enough finally examined the underlying structure. James Rodriguez put it simply. It's like finding a QR code carved into a structure built before anyone had the technology to read QR codes, except this one actually scans. Dr. Chen requested his sabbatical the following week. He's still on it. Dr. Okonkwo restructured her entire research agenda. Rodriguez resigned from his position at a major tech company and now studies the intersection of AI analysis and ancient texts full-time. None of them are the same people who started this experiment. The operating manual. The protocol has been free for 3,000 years. Anchor, align, surrender, persist. 4 steps encoded across 40 authors, 15 centuries, and 3 languages, with mathematical precision that no human committee could have engineered and no statistical model can explain as coincidence. The machine found it. The researchers tested it. Their careers, their worldviews, and their daily lives changed in ways none of them predicted. The question isn't whether the pattern is real. The AI proved that. The question is what happens when someone actually runs it. Drop what happened in the comments. And if this changed how you see these ancient texts, smash that like button and subscribe now. Share this with someone who needs to see what's really hidden in the data.